Welcome back, everyone. Michael here with Offshore Citizen. Today I'm going to talk to you about the expansion of the Common Reporting Standard that is being proposed at the moment. If you are not familiar, the Common Reporting Standard is part of a set of rules proposed by the OECD. It was bringing in something called automatic exchange of information. It was regulations, or is regulations, at a bank level that essentially has made all of the banks that you would typically want to bank at into reporting agents for the governments of the various different countries. And so there's some new proposals about how to expand it, and I'm going to discuss those with you today. Before we do, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button, hit the all notification bell. Thank you for your support. Appreciate you joining us. If you'd like help with doing banking internationally, getting residencies or citizenships abroad, paying the lowest legal amount of tax possible, etc., please reach out to us. You can book a call, calendly.com/Michael-Rosmer, link in the description below, or send a message through our websites, offshorecitizen.net and offshorecapitalist.com. Okay, so as I was mentioning, the Common Reporting Standard has been around since, I believe it was around 2017, and this is essentially where the banks that you're going to bank at, pretty much almost any place you would want to bank, Georgia being the notable holdout for a long time, as a participant in the Common Reporting Standard. And it was kind of the global version of the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. So the US in 2015 brought in the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, basically made every bank in the world a reporting agent for the IRS. The way they did this was to say every bank needs to report US persons back to the IRS. And if they don't comply, they're going to hit all the US dollar transfers with a 30% withholding. And so this obviously is, basically would make it impossible to deal with US dollars. And to be fair, some of the banks have moved away and not done anything US dollars, but pretty much they had to jump on board. Now, at the time, so FATCA is governed by something called IGAs, Intergovernmental Agreements. And some of these are bilateral information sharing, some are not. So some people kind of get confused about how this works. It means that sometimes the US will report back to your country, and sometimes it will not. So you have to check on a country-by-country basis to see. Now, the OECD kind of looked at that and did their own version of it a couple of years later, called the Automatic Exchange of Information Common Reporting Standard. And so this is what's widely known as CRS in the banking terms. And under these rules, they have some slight different nuances compared to FATCA, but it's basically the same idea that if you have a bank account in, like I said, pretty much any bank that you would care to bank in, then they will report the account and the balances back to your country of residence once a year. Okay? And of course, there was all sorts of attempts to get around this, and people used second residences or second passports or all different things to try and do that, going with different types of financial institutions, but it's gradually encroached. Well, this year they have proposed the Crypto Asset Reporting Framework. And here they're wanting all the different players involved in crypto, most notably exchanges, but all sorts of others as well, to be reporting back as part of the Common Reporting Standard, not just the banks, and to report what is a pretty burdensome set of requirements. So here's to me, kind of the really big key. There's of course the normal KYC. Okay, great, you're going to report normal information. But when you're doing the Common Reporting Standard, you're just reporting balances. Here they want to report all of the transactions the person had, which is pretty crazy. This is a lot of reporting, okay? Now, the EU has recently gone through and put out some draft proposals for regulating DeFi, decentralized finance. And actually the EU's proposals I thought were fairly reasonable in the sense that they actually, if you read the document over, they took a lot of time to actually understand DeFi quite well and to realize that you can't use old regulatory approaches to this new technology. And the principal reason for this is because the old regulatory approaches are based on the idea of finding these centralized intermediaries, kind of like Operation Choke Point has done in the US with funds for various different things, and to get them to be the ones who report. And that makes sense in kind of a traditional financial system environment. But when you're looking at decentralized finance, it doesn't, because you don't have these. And so what do you do? Well, one is to just try and find all these and force them, hey, who can I find who's the centralized actor? And kind of go on this wild goose chase or witch hunt. The other is to say, hey, this system functions fundamentally differently, so we need to understand it and we need to look and deal with different players in a different way. And so they actually kind of proposed that, which I thought was reasonable. This crypto asset reporting framework for kind of the expansion on CRS from the OECD, I think is less understanding of the situation and just way more burdensome. So what does this mean? Well, it means that increasingly, I think you should expect that all of your information, if you have money in an exchange, for sure, any centralized body within crypto will get reported back. This is pretty much guaranteed over time. They will all collect KYC. They're all going to report back. There will be, of course, decentralized protocols, but oftentimes what you'll have is you'll get somebody who will put a KYC layer on a website on the front end because they can control that. So for example, MetaMask, Uniswap, okay, yes, the protocols behind there might be decentralized, but the companies in managing the website or managing this app are not. And so you're probably over time going to see this. Now, of course, the counter argument is this is going to create a lot of opportunity for people in other places to step in. And so I see two big injections of opportunity. One is what we've already seen with crypto. The traditional tax havens, BVI, Anguilla, Vanuatu, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, et cetera, really have dropped in popularity quite a bit since their heyday. I would say the heyday was probably 2000 to kind of post 2009, maybe like 2012, something like that. And since probably about 2015, mainly with FATCA, et cetera, you've seen a decline in those. And the main reason is banking has been really this choke point, right? So for a long time, the governments were getting information through tax information exchange agreements. They weren't very effective. It wasn't automatic. It was a cumbersome process. There weren't that many information requests. They weren't allowed to go on fishing expeditions. The countries that they would request them from often weren't well organized to be able to provide the information back anyway. And so they discovered that by going after banking, they could kind of end a lot of this. And this cut down on it a lot and made banks much more wary, et cetera, right? Okay, fast forward to the present. BVI, for example, has been doing really well. Why have they been doing really well? Well, because they're one of the main homes of crypto projects. And crypto projects can use BVI suddenly because it's a low regulatory environment that is relatively inexpensive, relatively kind of seamless in terms of not creating any sort of additional burdens for tax, et cetera, depending on, say, if you have an LP there, your limited partners are not going to be hit with some additional tax like they would be if they were, say, in the US. But at the same time, they also don't need bank accounts, or they can get by using a collection of entities to not involve any bank accounts, and that's really helpful. So this has been a big thing. What are you probably going to see now? What you'll probably see now is other organizations who are in a situation that they can run an exchange, they can run some sort of custodian service, et cetera, and they don't need to deal with banking. And because they don't need to deal with banking, they don't need to be in a country that is signed on to CRS. And so you'll probably get this new kind of offshore financial industry that will develop in some of these farther out places. And there's going to be a lot of opportunity for the financial services industries in those different places. So I expect that will be quite interesting. The other opportunity I see is governments are faced with a huge problem with all this reporting, which is they're overwhelmed, right? There's something I heard recently, which was if you want to confuse somebody, just give them a whole bunch of information, and they'll do it to themselves, right? So too much information can be a problem. You have information overload. And how are the governments going to deal with this? Well, the most logical way that they're going to deal with it is to apply machine learning. They'll just dump all the information to some sort of a database, and they'll have some kind of software that goes through and parses it, figures out correlations, and traces down the highest value or highest likelihood people to go after, and they'll go and audit them accordingly. And so the companies that provide that software and those solutions are going to do really well. So anyway, those are kind of my predictions. Would love to hear what you think. Put them in the comments below if you have any questions, and I'm going to look forward to seeing you on the next video.